This is a strange phone because on one hand, the phone is so bad that it's not worth buying, but on the other hand, the Samsung A42 5G is still a usable phone today, but only barely. On paper, it's a strange one because it's half the performance of the flagship chips used in its year, 2020. That roughly 50% would be like a Snapdragon 8 Elite Gen 5 compared to the Snapdragon 8 Gen 3. Well, almost. That said, it's not 2020 and the Snapdragon 750G is a mid-ranger of the mid-range, so good enough performance, but gaming is not something you want to do unless it's a lighter game. The US versions generally came with 4GB of RAM and 128GB of UFS 2.1 storage, with the former not being great while the latter is expandable. Android 13 is where this will stay forever, but apparently other versions of the A42 go to Android 12 only, even though those have 6GB of RAM and even more in some cases, all while carrying the same processor. Either way, it isn't terrible like the A51 4G, but it's still not amazing. One thing that is the battery. I'm not sure if I got a lightly used battery, but this gives solid battery life. Sure, the phone's kind of slow, but the battery performance makes up for it. Kind of. The charging speed isn't great, about 15 watts wired out of this USB-C 2.0 port, and that's it. No wireless, no modern fast charging, just 15 watts into that 5000 milliamp battery, which takes a while. Size-wise, it's decently tall at 6.47 inches and light, but not at 193 grams. That's because this is essentially an all-plastic phone, with the top having a microphone, the left side having the SIM and SD card tray, while the right side has the power and volume buttons. Bottom is where the USB-C port is, another microphone, and the single loudspeaker and headset jack. Essentially, this is like a better A51 4G as the whole phone is built very similarly, just with 5G and bigger. The back is also plastic with 4 cameras as you can see, but I got this weird one. I got the 4 camera back, but my phone only has 3 cameras and 1 flash in the camera area, and that second flash is actually a fraud. Of course, that's covered by glass just like the front of the phone, which isn't the same as the A51 as it does have a water drop, or I guess a U for the front camera. This is a 6.6-inch OLED screen that runs at 60Hz and is only 720p, which is definitely noticeable. Quality isn't the greatest, but honestly feels a notch lower than 1080p, and by that I mean it doesn't feel like 720p if that makes sense. That might be why the battery life is good, but for those wanting 1080p or 1440p, obviously look elsewhere. This is a budget phone after all, but the A40 and A41 were both 1080p OLEDs. This does have an optical fingerprint scanner in the screen, and I'll say that the screen is bright enough and not too dim. Again, this is a mid-range. As for the cameras, it's technically dependent on which one you get, but generally you're going to get a 20 megapixel front camera, which is fine. Nothing groundbreaking here. 1080p 30 frames per second video, normal budget-ish front camera. Then on the back, we have an 8 megapixel ultra-wide camera that operates as you would assume. There's also a 2 megapixel depth camera. Okay. Then on others, you have a 5 megapixel macro camera, which again, okay. But on all of them, you have the main camera, which is a 48 megapixel half-inch sensor. I bring this up because the A51 4G and 5G both have the same spec camera, possibly being the exact same sensor, with the 5G version in the US having the Snapdragon 765G chip, which has the non-L version of the same image signal processor as the 750G in the A42 5G. All this to say that camera performance could actually be very similar to the A51 5G at least, as the A51 4G uses a Samsung processor that clearly does not have the same ISP. That said, who knows how true that is, because I didn't really test that aspect. Instead, I showed you some pictures and that 4K 30 frames per second video, and my conclusion is that this camera is meh. Now, I can tell you that using this phone is like the cameras. Meh. Like I said, not as bad as the A51 4G, but I recently used the A71 5G, and I will say performance is very similar. Vibrating motor is bad, but not as bad as the A51 4G, but also not as good as the A71 5G, with the Qualcomm processor at least. This phone also made me switch to the 3-button navigation like I did with the A51, so I guess that's a bad look for the A42. Looking into the specs, it seems the 750G replaces the 765G, but I'd still say that the A71 5G feels a little bit smoother than the A42 5G. This phone is weird being the first A40 series in the US, but like the A70 series, ends on the 2 with no A73 and no A43. 5G at least. So that means both were a failure, but that's not entirely true. In the US at least, the A70 series ended up being better than the A50 series, while the A42 was a great phone to give to your employees. I saw that happen so much for some reason. But in 2026, not that noteworthy of a phone. This was a $400 mid-range 5G phone back in 2020, and it did its job being half of what the best phones out there were doing, but was it really worth half the price? Nowadays, this falls under a $100 5G phone with a decent processor, but there's also a lot of phones in that price range. As for durability, plastic frame and back and the front is Gorilla Glass 3 over that hard OLED, which means two things. You can fix the screen only, like I did, if you can separate it without breaking, which so far I'm 1 for 3. You can see I didn't do a great job refurbishing this, as the polarizer layer did get some scratches in it, so whatever. Also, when the OLED breaks, replacement costs are about $50 plus, unless you want to go with a trash LCD and rely on Face Unlock for biometrics, since the fingerprint scanner will not work on an LCD. Everything else is cheap to replace, including the battery and charging port, and even the cameras. I did, however, pay more for the back of this phone, as this phone, when I bought it, was $3 because I had to refurbish it. Check your local markets. Sometimes you can get some broken phones pretty cheap. Just make sure to get it super cheap, or at least check the IMEI to make sure that it's clean. Do I recommend this phone? No. I wanted to, but it is getting old, the camera is okay, operations aren't the best, and really this just had good battery life and a headset jack, if you even need either of those. There's no Wi-Fi 6 in this thing, but we do get Bluetooth 5.0 and NFC if you do need it. Your mileage may vary though, because NFC might be country specific. You can still get a newer Galaxy S phone for under $200, so I would say just choose those, but really I wanted to check out this phone again and see if it got better or worse, and I would say that it wasn't as bad as I remembered, but only by a little bit. And that's my review of the Samsung A42 5G, the weird line of A series. But what do you think? Do you still have this phone and love it? Let me know, and as always, thanks for watching.